Good evening, everyone. I'm David Johnson of Transform Ed Consulting, and welcome to a live chat on Educational Innovation 360 Degrees, which is the brainchild of my dear colleague, Cassandra Williams. And we are happy to welcome to our live chat today, Carmela Levy-David. Carmela Levy-David is the Assistant Superintendent for Early Childhood and Elementary for the Fort Bend Independent School District. After 24 years in education, her skills include developing organizational culture, leadership, partnerships, and innovative program development. She holds undergraduate and graduate degrees from Texas A&M University, Prairie View A&M University, and the University of Phoenix, respectively. She is also a doctoral candidate in organizational leadership at Abilene Christian University. Carmela is a bilingual Latinx immigrant who is passionate about organizational culture development and inclusion in educational settings. For the last 5 years, she has worked to revitalize stagnant cultural frameworks, increase awareness of Latinx diversity in education, and develop organizational cultures that empower, educate, and support the learning community. Welcome, Carmela.
Thank you, David. It's so exciting to be here. I just want to thank you for giving me a few minutes to share and to have this platform to definitely include more individuals in the conversation. I do want to preface by saying that my opinions are my own, and I'm not necessarily representing Fort Bend ISD in this setting, but I always strive to make sure that my organization is the pride jewel of our community. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. Tell us how you got here. What is your background and where did you start and how did you get to be the assistant superintendent?
Well, my career has been a series of happy accidents. I've always loved education. My nickname as a kid was La Maestra, the teacher. I was always teaching other kids, and I graduated with a degree that allowed me to teach secondary education, and I began my career in Fort Bend ISD as a high school teacher, and eventually just had individuals say, hey, you do such a great job with helping kids, but would you consider counseling? That led to a master's in counseling. And then it was, oh, you're just, so good at helping others with problem solving. Would you consider, a master's in ed leadership? And so I did that, and it just continued that way. It's never been a, I'm going to do this by this time in my life type of goal setting. It's really been loving the work, loving the people, and having individuals approach me and saying, we think there's a different way that you can serve. Mm-hmm. And that's how I've arrived where I am. And I really love the work that I do.
So have you been with Fort Bend all along?
I have not. I began my work with Fort Bend in 1997. But I have also worked as an educator and administrator in Tucson, Arizona, in Champaign, Illinois, in Tampa, Florida, and Dallas, Texas.
So you worked in lots of different places and you've gathered a lot of experiences.
Lots of different organizational frameworks, lots of different cultural organizations.
Mm-hmm. So what advice would you give persons who aspire to be a superintendent or be a leader like you have been?
I would say that you really need to focus on learning what you're doing where you are right now, and becoming the best that you can possibly be, and really seek out mentors and role models who are where you aspire to be at some point, and have those critical conversations to make sure that that aspiration is actually a fit for your life. I've had to ensure that it's been a fit for mine.
Fit is a good word. So what would be the definition of fit? Meaning, if you were aspiring to be something, how do you know that you fit?
Am I able to be a good wife, a good mom, a good daughter, and also serve this organization to the best of my ability with the capacity that is necessary to fulfill the duties that I've been assigned? And am I able to go beyond that and contribute in other ways, and also bring other people into the fold to support them in growing their leadership?
Yes.
You have to leave every place better than you found it. So if you're able to do that, that's success.
Those are great ideas, Carmela. Thank you for sharing them with us. Our topic today is responsive organizational culture, and you're the one who can talk about this stuff, people-centered leadership. So we have one really big topic, responsive organizational culture characteristics. But before we dive into these questions you have here, you had some key questions, excuse me, these topics you have here, you had some key questions that we had sort of discussed earlier. What would some of those, or one or two of those questions be?
Well, one is, does culture and climate necessarily intersect in an organization?
Okay.
And how do you know that that's occurring in your organization?
Okay.
How do you know that the organizational culture and the climate are actually intersecting in a way that supports everyone's growth? Mm-hmm. And there's some things that we can do and to measure that and to see that it's being successful.
Okay.
And there are lots of other questions, but I don't want to just, rattle off questions. You feel free to ask me the questions that you want.
I certainly will. I certainly will ask you questions, but I know that your key questions were sort of provided guidance for direction that we might go in our conversation. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to give some of that guidance. You are a guidance counselor as well. So I thought, let's see what guidance she will provide for us today. All right, let's jump in. Everyone is a customer. Tell me, have you ever studied, what do we call it, quality management at one time? Do you remember the total quality management movement? The total quality management movement emphasized customers, and there were three things: give the customer what he or she wants, deserves, or even needs. So did you study TQM?
I wouldn't say that I formally studied, but I love to read, and I read books on all sorts of different topics, and I attend, different types of lectures from the Maxwells of the world to you name it. And so I really enjoy learning, and I especially love learning about how we treat people and how we are able to grow and maximize the potential that everyone has within them and the desire that everyone has to be successful. And understanding that everyone is a customer requires that we don't see people as workers or employees or as subordinates, but as individuals that we're here to serve. We are here to provide them with the best possible resources, opportunities, avenues, answers that we can provide to everyone to support their success.
So are you also implying servant leadership?
Absolutely. I think servant leadership is a huge part of that. I don't think that it encompasses all the pieces of leadership, but I think that is a huge part of how we ensure that we are actually treating everyone as a customer. How can I best serve you?
What other aspects of leadership would fall outside of the concept of servant leadership?
I think that transformational leadership sometimes will tend to fall outside of that concept of servant leadership, because transformation implies change, and change makes people uncomfortable. And at times when we seek to transform, we may not necessarily look at how the transformation is impacting those around us or impacting our most precious resource, which is our employees. And so that servant leadership and transformational leadership have to intersect as well in order to make sure that we're not leaving people behind.
Now, I would agree with you. I heard a speaker once who would say the only person or persons who like change are babies with wet diapers. So how do we make change palatable or easier for people?
I think a big part of that is communication. We have to be straight. We have to really tell people what the intention is behind the action. Our actions are shaped by our intent, and we have to allow everyone to have a voice and to provide feedback during the process. I think that those pieces really help to make the change less threatening. It helps to dispel the dissonance that can occur when we feel acted upon versus feeling like we're part of the change and part of the transition. And I think that we have to support things like agency and self-efficacy in the people that we work with and that we collaborate with. Notice that I didn't say lead necessarily, because there are those that we are leading and there are those that we're collaborating and working with. And our colleagues also need to grow in agency and self-efficacy to be able to lead effectively.
Now, you also seem to suggest what some people might call situational leadership, that there's a continuum of leadership and where you are on that continuum will differ.
It does differ for everyone, and it has to, because we're individuals. And I really love the work of Dr. Anthony Muhammad. He has a phrase that I just really love called perceptual predetermination, where he talks about how our personal experiences really manifest the way that we treat others, including students, including our colleagues, including the people in our organization. And our perceptual predetermination includes race, gender, social class, disability, English language proficiency, all of those pieces. And so we really have to be reflective in understanding that we all arrive with different experiences and different perceptions that determine how we do the work that we do.
Now, Carmela, let's take this back to the bullet. How does all of that fit into treating everyone as a customer?
Well, it fits because as we begin to have these critical dialogues, these crucial conversations, David, we're able to understand just where we may have blind spots, or just where we may have biases that are getting in the way of supporting everyone being successful, or where we may not necessarily be meeting the needs of all of our students. We talk about differentiating instruction. Well, differentiating instruction requires that we understand the cultural context that students are coming from, the social context that they're coming from, and also the same personal socialization that our teachers may be coming from. And having those critical conversations to make those pieces clear for everyone.
Well, you sort of implied the next bullet: critical conversations, communication foundation. All right, let's build upon that foundation of critical conversations.
Okay, the critical conversations definitely require that we not only are able to be flexible and adaptable, but that we are able to be respectful and also accept something that is very difficult, which is that we may have to set aside everything that we've learned, that we believe, that we think is right, in order to have the space to welcome different ideas, to welcome different ways of thinking, to welcome the fact that everyone's needs may not look like my own. Everyone's values may not look like my own. Their norms may not look like mine. And that's okay. That's not bad. That's actually an opportunity to learn. Pedro Noguera talks a lot about the opportunity to learn for students. And having those conversations and acknowledging, giving space to remove all of the baggage that we each bring to the table gives us an opportunity to give everyone the opportunity to learn, not only students, but also our colleagues.
I'm sure you've heard the expression, seek to understand before seeking to be understood. How do you use that in practice?
Well, I like to listen. I like to listen, and I like to communicate very clearly. And I think it's important to know when there is a disconnect, know when there is a place where I've gotten to this point and the other person has gotten to this point, and then there's the stuff in the middle that nobody wants to talk about, and someone has to be willing to bring it to the table and discuss it so that we can all reach the same understanding. And those conversations are uncomfortable, David. They're not. There's a great deal of discomfort in learning. Learning to walk is uncomfortable. Learning to understand that I may have had an idea about someone's background that was biased is extremely uncomfortable. And it's not something that we lunge forward toward. We avoid that like the plague. But more and more in education, what I see, especially in the last 18 months, is that we have to be willing to look past those barriers, and we have to be willing to embrace the things that can make us better together.
Here's a question that I have entertained in different settings, and now it's your turn. Let's say you have a leader, follower, or collaborator relationship, and there is, as you described, that ground in between where you're just not making the connection. Who has the greater responsibility to adapt? the leader or the follower?
I would say it's the responsibility of both. There is definitely a power imbalance in that situation that can certainly breed a great deal of insecurity for the person who is the follower. But the follower does have a responsibility to express the root of their discomfort in order to help the leader understand their needs. And the leader has a responsibility to take that as an opportunity, not a reproach or a criticism, but an opportunity. Anytime that we receive feedback that will help us to support others better, it's an opportunity to grow, and it's an opportunity to learn, and it's an opportunity to do what we do better.
And since you mentioned it, let's talk about feedback. What is the role that feedback plays in leadership?
Feedback is how we make concepts clear. When we have conversations, oftentimes we may be saying tomato and someone may be saying tomato. Feedback helps us to understand that we're saying the same thing, even though we may be saying it in different ways. Or feedback may help us to understand, really that was not what I wanted to communicate at all. And I need to go back to the drawing board. I need to make this clear. I need to probably, in some cases, make amends and apologize because I've contributed to the confusion. And that's a part of leadership. How do we make amends? How do we make it right when we've been part of the problem in creating the dissonance?
You're speaking of checking for understanding. What are some ways that a person, a leader, could check for understanding?
I think that one of the easiest ways to do that is to talk less and listen more, and to ask and welcome feedback and input. And I think that part of that process is ensuring that everyone who is going to be impacted has some type of seat at the table where they can provide their idea of what this could look like. Not should, but could look like. And not having that be something that derails the process necessarily, but something that enhances how we build the process. Feedback is a way to ensure that we value everyone's time and everyone's work effort and sweat equity. And feedback is our way to ensure that we are being responsive.
Wow, those are good ideas. Thank you, Carmela. Thank you for that. Let's move on to your next bullet. Recognizes, celebrates, and mourns transitions. Now, I caught recognize, I caught celebrate, but how does mourn transition fit to this?
Well, and I'll use an example from the past 18 months. As we all navigated the difficulties of adjusting to a new reality with the pandemic and our lifestyles being interrupted, and students with increasing learning gaps due to the interruptions of all of those transitions that took place, there were some things that were lost. There was some continuity that was lost. There were colleagues that were lost, family members that were lost. There was a sense of normalcy, safety, and security that was lost. And we have to be courageous enough in recognizing that those things need to be acknowledged. They need to be voiced. We need to give voice to them so that people can actually process it and move forward and move beyond it and grow from it. When we don't allow space for recognizing, celebrating, or even mourning those transitions, those things tend to fester and people feel like they're not as important. And the most important part of any organization are the people.
Fester. Very, very good word. Fester. Very, very good word. And speaking of words and good words, I gave you a term, OBE, overcome by events. And we would say that the pandemic caused OBE. Could you elaborate on your perspective of how OBE or how the pandemic caused OBE?
So OBE, for those who may not be aware, stands for overcome by events. And as we passed worked through the last 18 months, we found ourselves continuously overcome by events that were beyond our control, whether it was a shutdown, or whether it was not being able to get computers for all of our students on time, or whether it was parents who suddenly did not have childcare when their students had to go to school online. There are all of these pieces of being overcome by events that we have to understand, we have to acknowledge, and we have had to navigate through as leaders. And it's not over. We are still going to be challenged for the foreseeable future as we recover to be overcome by events. And we have to just be very transparent with people that is what we're experiencing, and not necessarily always ask for grace, because grace is not always given, but definitely be honest that this is the transition, and this is why it's occurring. And some of these events impact not only our customers, but they impact the members of the organization who are there to actually move and drive the work. They're being impacted very personally as well.
So what do you believe would be the leader's responsibility when OBE occurs?
The leader's responsibility is what it's always been. We have to find the solutions. We have to let go of control and actually allow space for others to engage in the process of problem solving, to engage in showcasing their talents, to engage in sharing their ideas without fear, without any type of insecurity about voicing their path, voicing their journey, voicing their expectation for how things should be navigated. Mm-hmm. In all of the chatter, there is order that comes about mm-hmm. when we find the right solution. Mm-hmm. So, but we have to engage in the chatter. And as the leader of the organization, we have to not be intimidated by that process. We have mm-hmm. to welcome it, we have to embrace it, and we have to make space for it.
Thank you, Carmela. We'd better move on. Prioritizes cultural competence. Cultural competence is a weighty topic right now, particularly with all the battles regarding critical race theory and other topics that are related to the cultural diversity we have in the United States. Now, I know your background, or you have in your rich and broad background experience with early childhood. How does cultural competence affect what teachers do in an early childhood classroom?
Oh, it just has so many different outputs. I personally feel that early childhood is the biggest, greatest battleground that we have engaged in education in a very long time. And we are just now beginning to understand just how powerful early learning experiences are for students, and how we truly have responsibilities that go beyond the Crayola curriculum to help students develop executive functions that will help them be successful throughout their educational career. What I can say about the whole cultural responsiveness piece is that as an immigrant and as a Latinx person, I can tell you that my individual race and ethnicity doesn't make me immune to how I perceive others. I acknowledge that. I know that. And it's the same for everyone in an organization. Our individual experiences don't make us immune to having perceptions of students that don't support their success. We have to be able to have those conversations. We have to provide a venue for professional development that helps people to understand how we can support students who come from all different backgrounds, who may speak other languages, who may be coming from home situations that are not ideal, and not use that as an excuse to undersell their value or their ability to be successful, but to use it as an opportunity to provide increased resources to boost their success. And that's what I refer to.
Carmela, we know that one of the purposes of early childhood education and kindergarten is to prepare students for first grade, a sort of socialization. Whose social whose socialization point should we be aiming students toward in the consideration of cultural competence? In a way, that's asking the melting pot or the salad.
Well, I am more in favor of the salad. I think that there is value in diversity. I think that there's value in helping students to love and appreciate their background and honor it. And their cultural differences are an asset, not a detriment to their growth. It hasn't been a detriment to me. And I work in one of the most diverse organizations in the country. And I know that for me, it's more than a moral imperative. It's something that has to be born from love. Our actions are shaped by our intent, but do we love the people that we work with? And does that align and support the moral imperative? The moral imperative by itself is not sufficient without love. You have to love the people that you're serving. You have to love the children that you're serving. And you have to ensure that those conversations and those relationships are nurturing the resiliency in ourselves and in others, and that they're honoring the best version of ourselves every day that we come in front of students and we work with our colleagues.
So what is a leader's responsibility to enact or encourage cultural competence?
We need to have a target. And our target needs to be with people at the center. Our target needs to be providing the best possible early learning opportunities for our students. Our target needs to be to first do no harm. Our target needs to be to have an open mind and an open heart for all members of our organization. And our target needs to definitely be grounded in understanding how our personal reality impacts the work that we do.
Okay. Well, we have around 2 minutes left, perhaps. How about systemizing work-life balance and mental health? A lot of attention is being given to mental health, right? Not only to students, K-20, but to adults and teachers in particular as well. What are your thoughts regarding work-life balance and mental health?
More than ever, we need to build effective teams where people care about one another and people are able to support one another. As we deal with the OBEs being overcome by events, it is more critical than ever to understand that everyone is experiencing what's happening differently. For some people, it's avoidance. For some, it breeds anxiety. They have sleepless nights. For others, it may be physical illness that may be manifesting as a result. And we definitely have to ensure that we provide resources, whether employees have benefits or not, that are accessible to help them address those pieces and to help them be safe in the work that they're doing with their colleagues and with students every single day and with families. And we need to just be more compassionate with the people that we lead and know that mental health is a life-changing issue for many. In many cultures, it's still a taboo. It's something that is not spoken of, but we need to talk about it. We need to take the cobwebs off of our perceptions of mental health, and we need to make sure that we're addressing it organizationally on a daily basis, David, on a daily basis.
Carmela, we have only a minute. So we had a lot of good discussion here. Could you boil all of it down into a takeaway?
Takeaway for me, and what I would encourage everyone to do, is to strive to be the leader that you want. Strive to be that person that's accessible, that loves people, that embraces challenges, and that doesn't seek to control, but seeks to make sure that others have a seat at the table and have a voice. And strive to be that leader that is always going to welcome feedback, even when it's uncomfortable, because we grow from that. And also make sure that everything that you do is done with love and is done with the intent, the actions being shaped by your intent, which is always first do no harm.
And if people want to know more, how can they contact you?
They can contact me on Twitter at Carmela Levy-D, also on LinkedIn, and that's actually at the bottom of this page. And they can also reach me at my personal email if they like, and that's cmlevydavid@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm. Wow, Carmela Levy-David, it's been a pleasure conversing with you. You are a ray of sunshine in this tough environment we're in right now. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you for being our guest tonight. And our topic was responsive organizational culture, people-centered leadership. And thanks again to Cassandra Williams, my buddy, who is the brainchild behind Educational Innovation 360 Degrees. And thank you to our audience who is here with us tonight. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did. So good night to you all.
Buenas noches a todos.